I live here in Kona. I work with the University of the Nations, YWAM, or Youth with the Mission. So I'm a missionary with my wife and my two boys. We've been in Kona since 2015, but we've been in YWAM since like 2012-ish. That's when I did my very first school with YWAM. That's when I did my very first like little missions trip. So we've been working with them since then. But really, as I was praying this week about what I wanted to share, I'm going to be sharing this week and then also next week. But really, I was praying this week about what I wanted to share. And, sometimes when you're praying and you're asking the Lord, like, man, what do I share on? Or what does the congregation need to hear? Sometimes he just leaves it up to you. And you know what I mean? And I don't like it when that happens, because then I really got to, think and you got to kind of be smart, you know what I mean? And I'm not that I'm dumb, but I'm not the smartest guy in the world, not like Andrew or Pastor Bruce or guys like that, So really, I would love to share my story. I know a lot of you guys have probably heard it before, but I'm going to share my story this morning. Hopefully it's encouraging, and then maybe we'll circle back and talk about some other stuff too. But I want to share kind of like my background, where I come from, especially because I'm going to be sharing twice, or this week and then also next week, yeah? So I am from California. I'm from Central California, right smack dab in the middle, a place called Fresno. It is super hot there, and that's where I was born and where I was raised. Oh, sorry, up here. That's where I was born. It's where I was raised. Yeah. Come from somewhat of a Christian family, kind of, right? That's kind of what the story's about here. My dad worked he worked kind of with the church. He would go on little trips here and there, missions trips, and as far as everybody else knew, my family was a perfect, family. But really, behind closed doors, there was zero. There wasn't none of that stuff behind closed doors. Like actually at home, none of that existed, right? My mom and dad, like I said, they were missionaries. They would go on missions trips all the time. I remember they would go into different prisons and prison systems and throughout Central America or Cuba and things like that. And so, that's kind of the model that I had for believers, for Christians, and for Christianity. But then my dad would come home and he was just the opposite, right? He was not a good person. My mom was in and out of the hospital because of my dad. My dad was in and out of jail. My older brothers and sisters were also in and out of the hospital. And I was a little guy when all that stuff was going on. I was like probably 5 or 6. But eventually what had happened was my dad just left one day. And I think I was 9 years old. And so when he was gone, he was kind of the one that was taking everyone to church, you know what I mean? And so when my dad left, we kind of just stopped going to church. My mom fell off the deep end, and we all kind of just were surviving at that point. And I figured that's how Christians were, you know what I mean? Because that's what my model was, yeah? My model was this father figure that was absolutely not a father figure. And so for years, I was just completely lost. I got mixed up in some crazy stuff. In California, gangs run rampant, and so I joined some gangs. I did some different things like that. Got into some drugs and alcohol, the whole thing. When I was 15 years old, and this is kind of where the story gets super epic. When I was 15 years old, I got arrested for theft, like some petty theft, silly stuff. I was just a kid who was doing silly stuff. And I pretty much had this option of I could either do a ton of hours of community service, like crazy amount of hours, especially for a kid. It was like a full-time job I had to do for a year, or I can go to jail. And so I chose the community service, and I reached out to some different people, and this police officer that was working with me, the school police officer, he pretty much said, like, reach out to churches or libraries and things like that. That's who's going to be able to help you the most. You don't want to be picking up, trash on the side of the road. This is who you should reach out to, is churches and libraries. And so I reached out to churches, finally got a hold of this church. really, really small church that met inside of a middle school. And so my whole job was to go in there and set up their, kind of like what I do here, actually. I would set up all their chairs, and I'd set stuff up like that, and I would do their sound and stuff like that, and account it for my community service, which was awesome. And now, mind you, I didn't really like Christians very much, right, because of who my dad was. And so I didn't love this job, or this community service. But there was a few Sundays where I would have to set up like a little jacuzzi that they had, and they would do baptisms in it. And it was kind of a nightmare, actually. It would take forever setting these things up. And it was like, I don't remember how many times I had been there before, but it was within the first little bit. It was like my 5th time going or something like that. I set up this jacuzzi, and this guy rolls in with his son, and they're going to get baptized. And he has, the dude's covered in tattoos, and his boy is like maybe 9 or 10 years old. And they're both wearing their white shirts. They're getting into the jacuzzi. And my job was to set up the jacuzzi, get a little camera, and then record everyone getting baptized for the pastor to have and whatever. So, this guy who, I can't remember his name, but he was getting baptized with his son, and they were going to get baptized together. And I don't remember what happened in my heart. I just remember, because I had to watch it. I was watching it through a camera. I remember seeing this man get baptized, like, and kind of knowing his background a little bit just through his tattoos, and knowing this was him giving his life to Jesus. And not only that, he was giving his life to Jesus, committing his life to Jesus, with his boy, like with his son. And it was insane. But the thing is I didn't understand what was going on in my heart. I didn't understand the significance of what was happening. All I knew is my heart was connecting with what was happening, right? So that was kind of the first time that I was like, man, there's something special about what just happened, and I don't know why it was so special. Fast forward to towards the end of my community service, I got to know the pastor quite a bit, the youth pastor, and he would talk to me, and he was the one kind of leading me through all the chairs and sound and stuff like that. He invited me to go to this camp, and they called it Man Camp. They called it Man Maker Camp. That's what it was. And it was specifically for kids like me, actually. It was for like inner city kids, teenagers that didn't really have a father figure in their life. He was pitching it to me like that, and he was pretty much saying like, we'll teach you how to hunt, we'll teach you how to like make a fire, how to use your hands, how to swing a hammer, like how do you shake someone's hand, like how long do you look at someone in the eye, like how do you like talk man to man to somebody, things like that I should have known, right? Because I should have had a father in my life. But they had this program for kids like me, and he invited me to go to it. Gave me, he invited me to it, and so I was so down. So me and my little brother jumped into this camp, and they didn't talk about Jesus. It was run by the church, but they didn't really talk about Jesus that much, right? They just kind of shared on with the things I was just telling you about. They talked about integrity and honor and respect and love, and how they love their wives and how they love their children, how they protect their wives and their children and provide for them. All this crazy, really cool stuff that is so outside my realm of what I understood as a young teenager. And really, what I tell people is like that wasn't the first time I realized that I need a relationship with Jesus, but it was the first time that I realized that you could have a relationship with Jesus and be a good person. Like it was kind of like I didn't love Jesus, but I finally for the first time I met some people that actually truly did love Jesus a lot with their lives. And so I got to know these guys really, really well, and just went back to school after that. That was like a summer camp. I got back into the same thing. Like I was just still just super lost. Yeah. Still crazy lost. And then the next summer rolls around, they invited me back. And so I did it again. And then that summer, there was this new guy who was there that I had never met before. And he was young. He was like 19 years old. And at the time I was 17. And he had just got back from this missions trip, this big thing. And he was going to share on it like the weekend after the camp. And so they all invited me, obviously. They would invite me to church all the time, invite me to youth group all the time, and I would never go. But my little brother dragged me to this to watch this guy's testimony and all this stuff. The guy's name was Josh. And Josh He's up front in the youth group, and he's sharing. He's got this like slideshow about him in Mexico and all this cool stuff. And I'm like, what was it that you were doing after? I was like, what was it that you were doing? He was like, oh, I was in this school called the Discipleship Training School. It's through this organization called Youth with a Mission. And I was like, well, okay, that's cool, And he comes up to me after, and he's like emotional. You could see it on his face. He's like emotional. He's like, I just need to talk to you about something. And that was the first time I'd ever talked to him. He's like, I wanna share with you like this what actually happened to me in this DTS. He's like, I feel like the Lord's telling me that what you're doing right now, like it's not what you're created for. It's not what you're supposed to be doing. And mind you, the dude doesn't know me. And so I thought he was weird, and I'm like, nope, I don't want to talk to you, dude. And so I just pretty much was like, I don't want to meet with you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to really know, And so I left the youth group. Wasn't really planning on going back. But one day I was walking home from high school. I was a senior in high school. It was like a few months later, and I'm walking home, and there's a Starbucks right by my high school, and I was so thirsty. So I go inside this Starbucks to get some water, and sure enough, there's Josh right there, and he's like, "Hey, I still want to talk to you. Can I buy you some coffee?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you want to buy me coffee? I'll let you buy me coffee, And so we sit down, and he's just telling me about DTS, about YWAM, about all this stuff, and I'm like, that's good for you, but that's not what I'm doing. And he was like, well, what are you gonna do after high school? And my whole plan was pretty much I just wanted to make it to the end of high school. I didn't really know what I was gonna do after that, And he's like, just come back and meet me here at this time after school, just every day, and I'll buy you coffee and we'll just talk. And so I did, and that was like the last few months of school. I would just go and I would meet with Josh, and I had no idea what he was doing, but he was discipling me. He was like walking with me. You know what I mean? He was very clearly like preaching the gospel and all that stuff to me. And then one day he's like, well, did you think about the school that I've been talking about, this school? And I'm like, dude, I can't do that. Like, I don't have money to do that. I'm not a Christian, like all this stuff. And he's like, he words it in a certain way where he's like, bro, you don't really need to be a Christian to go. And I'm like, yes, you do. You absolutely do. He's like, no, like, just go. I just want you to go. And then he's like, I'll help you even pay for it. And he helped me raise the money and pay for it. That's what he was telling me. And I'm like, fine. It was the school that I went to was a musician's DTS. It was a music school, and I was a musician. And so he was like, it's like a music school. Like, you can go, you can play music, you're able to travel. Like, just go. It's going to be really good for you. While in the back of his head, this whole time he's thinking, Drew's going to go out there, and he's going to get absolutely saved by Jesus, and his life's going to change. I wasn't thinking that. I'm thinking like, oh, cool. I get to play music and travel, and it'll be super fun, actually. So he finally convinces me to go to this school. So I fly out to Denver, fast forward, and that was in the summer. This is in the fall. That was at the beginning of the summer. This is in the fall. Fly out to Denver for my DTS, for my discipleship training school. And I land. I didn't even have a Bible. I legit didn't even have a Bible. I didn't have anything. I was not prepared for what I was about to go through. I had no idea what YWAM was. And I land and I sign in, and that night there was like a little dessert night, so we eat dessert. And then the next night there was like a kind of orientation and then like a big worship night, right? And so this worship night is in this really intimate like setting. It's like nice little dark room, like just this epic worship band. And they're singing songs about Jesus and stuff, and I'm just like, this is uncomfortable. I was like, I have no idea what I just got myself into. I'm nervous, and these people are weird. It was mostly like a lot of homeschooled kids that were not into the stuff I was into. You know what I mean? Like, I was nearly about to go through withdrawals. It was my second day, and I'm like gonna start going through some stuff, and nobody knew my background, and so man, they're singing this song, and I don't even remember what song it was. I can't ever remember. Every time I share my story, I always am like, I know the song before I share the story, and I start sharing, I'm like, oh, forgot it. I can't remember the song. But it was this song by Brian Johnson or somebody out there, and it's pretty much singing about how, like, Jesus will not stop pursuing you, and how you could run for as long as you want. You could avoid him for as long as you want. You could even say, like, I don't want it, right? And you don't need it. Like you don't have to say yes to Jesus, right? But he's going to keep pursuing you. He's always going to be there for you to say yes to. And how he's not going to give up, right? And I'm like, I don't know what happens, but something like a wave of love hits me in a way that it's never hit me before, like ever. And I didn't even have words for it, right? And I didn't have words for what I was going through. And I just started crying. Like I just started weeping my face off in front of all these people. And I'm embarrassed and all this stuff. And I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on. Somebody comes over to me like, hey, like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like for the very first time in my life, I feel like I'm loved. Like I just got touched by love for the very first time ever. Like true, real love, not like something else, like counterfeit love. And so I got touched by love for the very first time by Jesus. And the thing that got me was like, no matter what you do, no matter what you've done, right? This is everybody, right? No matter what you've done, like Jesus wants a relationship with me. And so I gave my life to Jesus that night, and someone taught me, to hear the voice of God, right? That's the big part of DTS is hearing the voice of the Lord. And I really, really felt like the Lord said, like, it was like a welcome home party. It was like a welcome home party. And since then, I've never left YWAM. I've been in YWAM since then. That was, again, it was like 2012. That was 2012, so that was like almost 9 years ago. And since then, like, my life hasn't really been easy. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually been pretty hard, most of it. And I've been through different things. I've been in different countries, and I've done missions trips, and I've been to Asia and Europe and Central America and all the different places, and I preached the gospel all over the world. But really, with my story, it's not about some like punk kid that could know Jesus. I'm not telling you guys to go find a kid and have coffee with him. That's not really what I'm saying through my story. The one thing I want people to know through my story is there's a lot of things, right? There's obviously so many things. There's so many really, really cool things that Jesus did in my life. But the one thing I would like for people to understand is that what I heard that night in my DTS, right? And what I heard that night in that one worship session was that I could, no matter what I did, no matter what I had ever said, no matter the things I've been through, like, Jesus absolutely wants a relationship with me. And that's been my message for my entire life. That's been my message since I've met Jesus, right? Since the beginning of being reborn. Kinda. No, that's a little, maybe we could talk after. We could talk a little bit after. Yeah, that sounds good. But I would really love if this today, instead of saying, I think last time I was here, we all signed up to, like, I want to meet with somebody. I want to talk to somebody. I want to, whether it be my neighbor or somebody that, maybe it's someone I go to church with, maybe it's somebody I work with. I just want to sit down with somebody and share my story with them. That was the last thing we talked about, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember how long ago that was. The last time I preached here, we talked about sharing stories. I talked about Berlin and how when I was in Berlin, I worked with refugees and they shared their story with me. And I shared my story with them. And there was a lot of breakthrough in just story sharing, right? This time, I would love it if our challenge, rather than just sharing stories, I would love it if we could actually just preach the gospel to somebody. The reason why my life is so different right now is because of one guy, right? It's because of Josh, right? I don't know how that all happened that way. I don't know. It's like so many of my bad decisions actually led me to Josh, right? And he's the one who preached the gospel to me and took the time out of his day to see my life get changed. But what if we can be like that for somebody else? That's really where I want to challenge this congregation with today. Maybe there's somebody you're thinking of, or maybe there's somebody in your life. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's, like I said, maybe it's your neighbor. Maybe it's somebody you work with. I want us all next week to come back with a story of how you shared the gospel with somebody, right? Maybe you shared your testimony with somebody. Maybe you sat down and had coffee with somebody. Maybe you just straight up shared the story of Jesus, right? The storyline of Jesus, the greatest story ever told, the gospel that God himself came down for us, then died for me, for you, for all of us, that we can have right standing with the Father. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But I'd love it if we could all share the gospel with somebody this week so that next week we can come back and have epic testimony of, hey, this person that I've been praying for years, the door finally opened for me to share the gospel with them, and they gave their life to Jesus, right? Because maybe sometimes it's, hey, I knocked on a person's door and they gave their life to Jesus that day, or maybe it's like this, like my story where I met with Josh and I was just super stubborn and he never got to lead me to the Lord, which is a crazy thing. But it was somebody else, right, in my DTS. But maybe that's what it is, right? So before we end, let's go ahead and pray. And as I'm praying, I want everybody to think about that. I want everybody to think about somebody in their life that you could share the gospel with, that you could share your testimony with, share about, man, here's where I was before Jesus, here's where I'm at now, right? And do you want to see your life changed, right? Because we have this epic thing that could totally change people's lives. Yeah? Okay, let's pray.